Hello YouTube and welcome back to another Blender tutorial. Today I'm continuing on the basic game tutorial. So today we're going to refine some of the physics of our character object. We're going to add a floor for our player to walk around on, and we're going to add in some coins. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is right now whenever we play the game, we see that the cube sits there, we can move around, right? But it's kind of boring having him just sit there. We kind of want him to be affected by gravity. So there's a few ways we can do this, but the simplest is to go to the physics tab right down here. Let me turn off the keyboard and change the physics type. So right now the physics type is set to static, and we want to change that. So most of the others are actually affected by gravity. So we've got the character, the soft body, rigid body, and dynamic are all affected by gravity. So the one that we're going to be using is character, and that's just because the cube that we have is going to act like a character. The character is going to feel a bit more solid than if you would do dynamic or rigid body. Okay, so something else we need to do is we need to make sure that our cube is going to collide with other objects in the world the way we want it to. And to do that, we simply scroll down in the physics tab, and we can checkmark collision bounds, and then we can choose what kind of shape closely matches our character or our object. Box is definitely the best option for our cube because that's actually exactly the shape that it is. You can see we have a bunch of other different collision bound types here. The triangle, mesh, and convex hull both use the polygons to decide how this object will collide, but we're not going to mess with those. We're just going to be using the box collider for our character. And so now, if we play the game, we see our cube falls right off the screen. And that brings up our next problem. We need to make sure that our player is able to land on something. So we're going to drag our cube up by grabbing on those arrows. If you don't have those arrows displayed, you can display them by clicking this button right here. And you can just click and drag on the axes that you want. By pressing down the middle mouse wheel, you can orbit your camera around. And so what we want to do is just drag our cube just above this sort of grid that we have here. Okay. So then we're going to add our ground object. In order to do that, we just hit, actually let me get my keyboard back up here. We just hit Shift A, add mesh. And so this brings up the add menu. So these are all the different objects that we can add. So we just want to add a simple plane. That's what we're going to use as our ground. So just go to mesh, plane, and click. And now we have this new plane here. But this doesn't look like a very big area for our cube to run around on. So we want to scale it up. So we're going to hit the S key, and we can scale it up, and we can just drag our mouse out to make a floor that's as big as we want it to be. Okay, so now if we play the game, we can see that our player can move around in all directions. I actually just realized that I had forgotten to turn the speed back down of the up and down movement. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, just because I'm going to select the cube and turn down the forward and backward speed. Okay, there we go. So the character physics type brings about some special motion. For instance, in the motion actuator, let me go ahead and add another actuator, a motion actuator. In the motion actuator now, we also have this character motion selection. And we have this new button down here, which is jump. So what we want to do is we want to link that to a key that we want to use to jump. So we're going to go ahead and add a keyboard sensor. I'm going to do the space bar, call it space. And I'm going to turn on tap mode and add a AND controller and just wire it straight across. So now whenever we hit the space bar, we're going to jump. Pretty simple. So I can then go ahead and play the game, move around and hit spacebar, and I jump. And you can adjust the jump height by going over to the physics tab, and you can see here we have the jump force, fall speed max, and step height, the different sort of settings for our character. Okay, so I want him to jump a little higher, so I'm just going to up the jump force by a little bit. We'll see how that looks. Hit P to test and spacebar. Okay, that's maybe a bit high. I'm just going to drop it down like 12, and we'll say that that's good. Okay, so we've got this little game here, but there's not really much of an objective. Right now we can just sort of run around on this plane. That's not very exciting. So let's go ahead and add some coins. And the object of this game is going to be to collect all of the coins to move on to the next level. Okay, so we're going to want to add in the coins, but we're going to want to make it so that if we want to make a change to the coins, such as how they look or how they act in the game world, we're going to want to make sure that that changes all of the coins at once instead of needing to go through and change the same thing on every single coin. Going to make our lives a lot easier. So we're going to go to the second layer by clicking this little button right here. And now you see everything disappeared. And that's because we're in another layer. Same way as like layers work in Photoshop and stuff like that. Layers in Blender keep objects sort of separate. So this is where we're going to add our coin. And we're then going to add this coin into the other layer in the game. So we're going to hit Shift A, and you can make the coin look however you want. I'm going to go ahead and do a cylinder. And I don't want it to be this high def, because if we have a ton of coins in the scene, it'll slow down the game. You see we have a lot of vertices. I don't want that. I'm going to click on this little plus up here, and then I'm going to re-add the cylinder. So Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder. And now you see over here we have some options for adding, such as vertices. I'm just going to drop that down to like 12. That looks good to me. So you can enter edit mode by pressing tab. I'm going to scale this down just on the vertical axis to make this look more like a coin. So I'm going to hit S, and if you hit your middle mouse button, middle mouse wheel, you can lock it to a certain axis. So I can lock it to scale just on the Z axes, or I could also do the X and Y, but I want just the Z for now. Okay, while I'm in edit mode, I'm going to want this coin to be flipped upright, because in the game I'm not going to have them laying down. I'm going to have them standing up on the edge and spinning. So I'm going to hit R to rotate, and then I'm going to type in how far I want it to rotate. I want to rotate this 90 degrees, so I'm just going to type in 90 and either left click or hit enter to confirm. Oops, did that wrong. R, X to lock it to the X axis, so now it only rotates around X, and then hit 90. Okay, so go back to object mode by pressing tab again. And now we're going to want to make this look kind of like a golden yellow. So I'm going to go to the materials tab down here, add a new material, and then I'm going to click on the diffuse color here. And I'm just going to select a color that looks pretty good. I'm going to go for kind of a golden yellow there. I think that looks good. Okay, so then we're going to want to name this object something special, something that we can remember later. And a name that makes sense is coin, so let's go ahead and call it that. So click on the object tab here, and here's where we can type in the name of the object. So I'm just going to type in coin. And then we're going to go back to our first layer. Okay, so here we are with our cube and plane. You can just cycle between the two layers if you want. So we're going to want to have an object in this layer that adds the coin in from the other layer. So we're going to use an empty for that. And an empty is just a regular game object that doesn't have a mesh. So we're going to hit Shift A, add empty. And you can use whichever one of these you want. I'm just going to use plain axes. And you can drag this just like any other object. And what we're going to do is we're going to place this wherever we want our coins to spawn. So I'm going to put one there. And now we're going to add some logic to it. So the logic for this one's going to be pretty simple. Right when the game starts, or right when the level starts, we just simply want this empty to add the coin object. And that's it. So we're going to add a always sensor. This will also only run once if you don't change anything with it. So there we go. That's exactly how we want it. Add a AND controller and just wire it straight across. And then we're going to add a edit object actuator. And the first option that the edit object actuator has is add object. So this actuator will add an object into the scene at the position of the current object. So make sure that's wired into the controller. And then we have this little field here. If we click it, we can see an option of all of the different objects we can add using this actuator. So we're going to select coin. Okay, so now if we play the game by moving the mouse over the 3D window and moving the mouse over the 3D window and hitting the P key, we see we get our coin added in. Not very exciting yet, but it's adding in. Okay, so why did we go through all that trouble whenever we could have just put the coin on the main scene? Well, it's pretty simple. Now all we have to do whenever we want to add more coins into this scene is we just hit Shift D and then we can drag this object around. So now we've got two of these empty objects. And if we play the game, both of those empties add a coin. So this makes it really nice because we just put these empties wherever we want the coin. Just hit Shift D to duplicate and then drag them around with the arrows wherever you want. Play and you see we can add in coins wherever we want them. And the reason we did it this way is because let's say I don't like the way this coin looks. Say I think it looks a little big in the game scene. Well, normally you would have to select each individual coin and size it. Make sure that they're all the same size. Well, all we have to do here is enter edit mode, hit S to scale it down, and make our coin smaller. Exit edit mode, go back to our first layer, play the game, and you see they're all smaller. It's pretty nice. Okay, so now we're going to add the logic for our coin. We need the player to add to a score whenever he collides with the coin, and we need the coin to disappear whenever he collides with the player. So let's go ahead and add the coin part first. So go to the second layer, select our coin, hit add sensor, and this is going to be a collision sensor because we're trying to detect if we are colliding with an object. Now you'll notice that the field here is the property field. That is empty. This is telling the sensor which specific game property it should look for. So, for instance, with it empty like this, any object that collides with the coin will trigger the sensor. But if we type in, for instance, player, then only objects that have the game property named player, like that, will trigger this sensor. Okay, so we're going to have that collision sensor. We're going to add a AND controller, just wire it straight across. Then we need to end the object, or destroy the object, so edit object. And then we see we can have a few different options for this particular actuator. So we have add object. If we click on that, we get a few different options. We have end, replace mesh, track to, and dynamics. Well, we want to end the object whenever it collides with the player, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so remember that this collision sensor is only going to detect objects with the property player, and the spelling and capitalization has to be exact. So we go to the first layer, select our player object, hit add game property, get it there, add game property, and then we're going to name this player exactly like we put in the sensor over there. And we should be good to go. So now we hit P to play the game, we move towards the coin, and we see as soon as we touch it, it disappears. Awesome. Okay, so now we want to add to a score whenever the player actually collides with the coin. So to do that, we're going to add a collision sensor because we're detecting if we're colliding with the coin. So we're going to type in the property field coin, add a and controller. Oh, let me get that. There we go. Wire that straight over to the and controller. And we're going to add a property actuator. So the property actuator can adjust these properties on the side here, these game properties. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a game property, and we're going to name this game property score. Let's go with that. And we're going to hit this little eye here. That eye allows us to see the property in the side of our game window. Okay, so then on the property actuator, we're going to switch its mode from assign to add. And we're going to click here and we can see all of the properties that we can change. So we're going to select score. We're going to add a value. Let's add 10 each time you get a coin. That sounds good. Okay, so in order to see this score property updating in our 3D window, we need to go to Game and Show Debug Properties. So what that will do is it will display any of those properties that we have the eye check marked on. It will display any of those up in the top left of our game window. Okay, so if I play the game, you can see there in the top left we have the cube score equals 0. So that's showing us that the score property on our cube equals 0. And if we collect the coins, nothing happens. Why does nothing happen? Well, that's because we told our collision sensor to only detect objects with the property coin, but we never added that property to our coin object. So now we need to go to our second layer, select our coin, and add a game property to that. And we're going to call that coin with the exact same spelling and capitalization. So now we go back to our first layer, play the game, go collect a coin, and you see the score is added. Okay, so let's make the coins look just a little more interesting. Let's have them spin around in the world. So go to the second layer. We can just simply add a always sensor, add a and controller, and a motion actuator because we want to make the coin spin. We want it to spin on the vertical axis, so we don't care how these coins are rotated. So we're going to uncheck the local coordinate and just adjust this. You can go ahead and preview it by going in the 3D window and hitting P. Sure, that looks like a good speed. So if we go back to our first layer, play the game, now we see all of the coins are spinning. That makes it look a lot more interesting. So now we have this player that can move around on this platform. He can jump, and we can go collect these coins. Okay. So I think that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to be going over how to go to the next level, well, how to add a new level, and how to go to the next level whenever all of the coins are collected. And we're also going to do some graphics adjustments to add some shadows and improve some of the shading. And I think we might also add the score display, like a regular score display. Not sure about that one though. We'll see. Alright, so I want to thank you guys very much for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.